Welcome to the Dad 77 podcast. I'm Kerry Briggs. I'm your host. This is my channel, and you may listen. So, we are doing a study in Revelations. There's a whole bunch of them on the website, the Dad 77 or Kerry Briggs, KerryBriggs. You can go back and search that and start at the beginning. But we are in chapter 12. I'm going to back up, though, a little bit about chapter 11. I want to make sure that was covered very well. In regard to the two witnesses put forth that that is not two individuals, as there's too much speculation about that. But when you look at it really hard, it's not two individuals. It's not Elijah and Moses. Elijah came. Moses, although some of the miracles or that were performed by these two is attributed to Moses, and the others are attributed to Elijah. But Jesus said, Elijah, if you can accept it, has already come, and he came in John. So Elijah's probably not one of them. Moses has already died, so he would have to be resurrected. And you want to use the passage in Hebrew of, it is appointed once for man to die. Well, he's already done that. So, but other people want to say it's Elijah and Enoch. But again, Elijah we already covered. Enoch, just because Hebrew says that doesn't mean that that is a hard and fast rule, because we also looked at, there's Jairus' daughter, there's Lazarus, there's the boy who fell out of the window when Elijah was preaching. All those people and many others were resurrected from the dead, so they died twice. Not only that, there's a whole generation of people who Paul says won't die. You'll just be changed in an instant. So I grew up trying to understand that these two witnesses, who they are, and that when in fact there's evidence, and you can go back to listen to the last podcast, that the two witnesses are the church. And some want to say that it is the Jewish remnant and the church, maybe, but more so that the two witnesses, the reason that there are two is Jewish law says that something is true by the witness of two. And so that's why there's two witnesses, to show that their body, or that their testimony is true. And on top of that, then the miracles that they had and performed were passed to the church once the Holy Spirit came on the scene, and the miracles are now handed to the church. The other thing is, when it says that they were killed and they're laying in the street, it says their bodies, they translate it bodies, but the Greek word is body, singular. It's not two bodies, it's one body that appears at that time to be killed, and then it is resurrected in verse 11, chapter 11, verse 11 and 12. It says, after 3.5 days, the breath of God came into them, and they stood to their feet. So they came back to life, and great fear fell on those. And then they heard a voice from heaven saying, come up here. And this, along with the sounding of the seventh trumpet, which happens at this same time, is thought to be the rapture of the church. So I just wanted to cover that again. And then now we are in chapter 12, and 12 has a lot more imagery, and we're going to try and discover it. I'm trying to move fast, but I already blew 5 minutes on that, and we got a lot to cover. So, chapter 12, verse 1, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in labor and in pains to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads, 10 horns, and on his head were 7 crowns, and his tail swept away a third of the stars of heaven and hurled them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour the child. Verse 5, she gave birth to a son, a male, who was going to rule the nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled to the wilderness, where she had a prepared place by God, so that she would be nourished for 1,260 days. And we've already talked, you have to listen to the next one. I don't have time. The 1,260 days, the 42 months, and the times, and halftime are all the same period of time, the same 3.5 years, which is a time frame of the church, basically from AD 70 to the end of the world. So we got a lot going on here in that who is the woman, who is the dragon, and who is the male child. Well, the easiest one to declare is the child. And so we're at verse 5, and it's a declaration of shall rule the nations with a rod of iron. This is from Psalms 2, verses 7 through 9. It says, I will announce a decree of the Lord. He said to me, so the Lord said to him, you are my son, today I have fathered you, or some translations say begotten you. Ask of me, and I will certainly give the nations as your inheritance, and the ends of the earth as your possession. And you shall break, that can also be translated rule from the Septuagint. You will rule them with a rod of iron, and you shall shatter them like earthenware. This is almost totally accepted that this is talking about the Messiah and talking about Jesus, that his inheritance is basically everything, and that he shall rule them with a rod of iron. If you go to Acts 13, verse 33, 33, that God has fulfilled the promises to those of us who are the descendants by raising Jesus, as it was also written in the second Psalms. So here Paul is referencing Psalm 2. You are my son, today I have fathered or begotten you. As for the fact that he raised him from the dead, never again to decay, he has spoken in this way, I will give you the holy and faithful mercies of David. And then it goes on and says that talks about him being resurrected because his body would not undergo decay. So even Paul's philosophy or his understanding is that this passage is about the resurrection and ascension of Jesus, not his birth, but it goes to him conquering all. How did he do that? At the cross, and being resurrected and now sitting at the right hand of God. He then has all. So that begotten is the begotten, the firstborn of the dead. And if you go to Colossians 1:18, we see that he is also the head of the body, the church, and he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he himself will come to have first place in everything. It was his 19. It was his Father's good pleasure for all the fullness to dwell in him, and through him reconcile all things to himself, whether things of the earth, things of the heaven, have made peace through the blood of his cross. So this here shows that Jesus is the firstborn of the dead. And this is what it's talking about here in Psalms. Not that he was born, but that he was the firstborn of the dead. And because of that, then he rules the nations. Everything has been given to him. Everything in earth, in the heaven, under the earth, in the sea. It is all his because of what he did on the cross. And we go back to Revelation, and it says, and the child was caught up to God and to his throne. So it jumps from Jesus being born to his ascension to back to heaven, and doesn't really talk about his ministry. We have a lot of other chapters that talk about his ministry and that. And then the woman fled into the wilderness, where a place was prepared for her for that time of 1,260 days, or 3.5 years, which we have already determined that I believe that is the age of the church from 70 AD to the end of the world. So that's the male child. So let's go to the red dragon. And interesting here, this is the first time that we see his origin. In no other place until here is the origin of the red dragon. It says, another sign appeared in heaven, behold, a red dragon having 7 heads, 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 crowns. So it's introducing the red dragon here as if we know who he is and everything, but he actually, in the next chapter, is actually really described who he is and that. And and this is, in verse 4, is where tradition says that a third of the angels were his angels that rebelled, and that a third of them, but it's not. This is one of only 1 or 2 verses where this is the only verse where the idea of 1/3 of the stars or angels were swept out of heaven. There's no indication anywhere else in the Bible that 1/3 of the angels fell. It all comes from this verse. And the issue is, we already have discovered and determined that numbers in Revelation are apocalyptic and not statistical numbers. So there's no reason to believe that all of a sudden now the number of 1/3 was a depiction of an actual number, or that 1/3 of them. That's not consistent with the scriptures. But what it does, let's see, if we go to Where do I want to go? If you go to Jude 6, verse 6, and here we go. Jude 6. And angels who did not keep their own dominion, but abandoned their proper dwelling place, these he has kept in eternal restraints under darkness for the judgment of the great day. So, well, let me read the other one. 2 Peter. I don't have that pulled up. Why not? Why do I not have that pulled up? Second Peter 2:14 says, no, it's not. Maybe I'm in. Oh, 2:4, not 2:14. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, so we know that some angels sinned, that some angels didn't hold and stay in doing what they were supposed to do, but were cast into hell and committed them to the pit of darkness held for judgment. This is the abyss that we've talked about before, and we're going to see that the dragon comes up out of the abyss, which we've seen in previous chapters. The abyss is that place where demons are being held until the time of judgment. Well, I wasn't really going to talk about that here, but I guess I will. If you go to John 12, verse 31, now judgment is upon this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. And this is a depiction of what's happening here as we go on. If you go down to the verse 7, which we'll get to that in more detail, but Michael and his angels war with them, and the dragon was cast out of heaven. That's this same individual in that. So he was cast out, and there's no real facts in the literature that show that the not always are stars considered angels, but not only that, is the number a third is not a statistical number, but that's it. So it's kind of grown up as a tradition of the church, but there's really no facts to that if you actually study it in that. So we have this red dragon, and the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour the child. And we see this when Jesus was born, that they fled to Egypt because Herod was trying to kill him. We know that we've already talked about prior to Jesus coming on the scene, there was a release of demons, that all of a sudden Satan is got demons everywhere throughout Israel to try and thwart and kill the ministry and everything of Jesus, because Jesus, everywhere he went, he cast out demons, he healed the sick, he sent the 72 out, go out, heal the sick, cast out demons. He sent the 12 out, go to the villages, to the lost tribe of Israel, and cast out demons, heal the sick, and that. So there was an onslaught of evil poured out by Satan to try and thwart what Jesus came to do. And it will describe who he is more. Yeah, we'll leave that. So now the woman. Who is the woman? So a woman clothed with the sun, moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars, and that tradition and the Catholic Church and even some denominational churches want to say that this is Mary, but again, there's depictions of groups, and they are said to be individual when in fact they're not individuals. It's a bigger entity. So if you actually look at this, the 12 stars, well, you can go to Daniel and remember when Daniel had his dream, and he had a dream that that the sun and the moon and the 11 stars would bow to him. Joseph, and Joseph being the 12th shows that, Jacob immediately knew what he was talking about, that he was the sun, that his wife was the moon, and the 7 stars were his, or the 12 stars were his 12 children. He knew it immediately, and he rebuked him. What, should we bow down to you? And so this is a depiction. This woman is Israel. It is not a individual woman, but it is Israel. And what was Israel's labor and the pain of giving birth? Well, that was how Israel had suffered and suffered and suffered, and that the pains of this was for the Messiah to eventually come on the scene and be the ruler, the savior, and that, although they felt some other kind of savior, but here it's that's the labor pain, is bringing the Messiah into the world. By the way, that dream of Joseph is in Genesis 37:9. So this woman is the remnant of Israel that escaped and continued the ministry that was started of Jesus, and that, but Israel here is the one who had pains of birth, a lot of persecution, and brought forth the Messiah for the rest of us, both Jew and Gentile. And so she cries out with labor pains, and then has this male child, and then she flees to the wilderness for the 1260 days, which is the time of the church, the times that the Gentiles would trample the outer court, trample Jerusalem, basically, and that. So then what happens? Well, then we go to a scene that is in heaven. I guess I did pull this up, so I should say this in regard to the labor. If you go to Jeremiah 4:31, it says, "And I heard a voice cry as a woman in labor, the anguish as one giving birth to her first child, the voice of the daughter of Zion, gasping for breath, stretching out her hand, saying, "Oh, woe to me, for I fainted before murderers." Here is the daughter of Zion, and the labor brought forth the Messiah. That the daughter of Zion is Jerusalem, and that Jerusalem was where Jesus would come and eventually die, and that. All right, so then we go to chapter 12, verse 7, and we have another scene here. It's a scene in heaven, and it's verse 7. And there was a war in heaven, and Michael and his angels waged war with the dragon. The dragon and his angels waged war, and they did not prevail. And there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan. So we know who he is. It's told here who he is. But this is the first time that the serpent of old, this is the first reference in any of the rest of the Bible that Satan, the devil, was specifically the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And what does he do? Who deceives the whole world? He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers and sisters has been thrown down, and the one who accuses them before God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, because of the word of their testimonies, and they did not love even their own lives when faced with death. For this reason, rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you with great wrath, knowing that his time is short. So we'll hit some of this. So this is, again, like I said, the first indication that that this same individual is specifically told that this is the serpent in the garden. So Michael and his angels cast him and his angels down. When did that happen? That happened at the cross, the crucifixion and the resurrection. Satan tried to kill Jesus before he came in to the world, and he tried to stop him from coming in, but he obviously did not, and he was then thrown down from heaven. There was no longer a place for him at the death and resurrection of Jesus. Okay, and then verse 10 through 12. So he's no longer able to accuse us before God any longer. Jesus bought us. We are now overcomers. We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony about Christ. And this is the spiritual warfare that we have, that we are overcomers, that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb. Not anything we do, it's because of the blood of the Lamb. And then the word of our testimony. This is the spiritual warfare that we have going on. And the dragon was thrown down, and it says in 13. And when the dragon saw that he was thrown down to earth, he persecuted the woman. Who's the woman? That's Israel. That's now the remnant, or soon to be the remnant, as they leave Jerusalem. The remnant, the Jewish Christians, leave Jerusalem because they're about to get surrounded and Jerusalem's going to fall. So they flee. The woman who gave birth to the male child, he persecuted them. He persecutes us. He no longer can do that before God, just like he did with Job. He accused Job. Well, he wouldn't follow you if you weren't on his side all the time. And God was like, all right, test him, but I know you're wrong. So he's thrown down, and persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the two wings of great eagles were given to the woman, and she flew into the wilderness, the remnant fleeing Jerusalem, where she was nourished. And here it comes from Daniel, the times, and half time, 3.5 years. So this again is the whole age of the church, which we're still in. Time, half times, away from the presence of the serpent. And the serpent hurled water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, so they might cause her to be swept away with the flood. And the earth helped the woman and opened up its mouth and drank the river the dragon was hurling at her. And the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children. This is another reason why it's not Mary, because, Mary did have other children, but this is now way past Mary. We're into 70 AD. We're into the end of the age. Well, Mary is not having children anymore. Her children who kept the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. So who is that? That's the church. The church holds the testimony of Jesus and the commandments of God. And the church consists now of both Jew and Gentile. So a lot of stuff there, I've gone way ahead of myself, I'm sure. The wings of great eagles. This is an allusion to what God said about Israel coming out of Egypt in Exodus 19:4. He says that he bore them on wings of eagles out of Egypt, and here we have another reference to that. The serpent hurled water like a river after the woman, who is the remnant of Israel, and the church. And what comes out of Satan's mouth? Lies. He's the father of lies, deceit, division, lust, anything that would make you turn your attention from God to things of the world. This is Satan's plan, his attack right now on us and the church. This you need to know. He really doesn't care if we sin, but if we turn our attention away from God and we don't love God, we don't worship God, we don't, we have all these other things which become idols. If we do that, then that's the war that Satan is waging against us. That we turn our attention from God, that we don't worship God, we don't praise God in that. So any of those things that fall into that category for you, That's how Satan works. He can't accuse up in heaven anymore. He can only come after us, and he comes after us these ways, trying to get us away from our attention to God and our worship of God. Verse 17. So the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children, which is the remnant in the church. And who are these? They are those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. This is the church, the present day church, both Jew and Gentile. We are one body, just like the two witnesses. It's two of them to prove that their witness is true, but it is one body. When they're laying in the streets, it's the Greek word is body, not bodies. And it is us that he is now waging war against. So I went over my 30 minutes by 6 minutes and 33 seconds and counting. I may come back to some of this just prior to going into chapter 13. But if you have questions, comments, you want to try and figure this out a little bit more, have questions, you can message me at 77thedad77@gmail.com. If you are a friend of me and you have questions, you can text me. You got my number if you're one of my friends. And we will continue this epic adventure.